Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Oliver and Barbara Johnson, 65 and 61 years old respectively, were having a calm evening at home when Barbara, in a casual tone, posed an unusual question to Oliver. "What would you think if I had an affair?" Without hesitation, Oliver replied, "I wouldn't like it." Although such a question might seem unexpected in most marriages, for the Johnsons, it wasn't entirely out of the ordinary. After 43 years together, their conversations often touched on topics that might surprise others. Barbara, still turning heads with her confident and attractive appearance in her early 60s, worked as a college professor. Barbara taught various philosophy courses, though she was particularly known for her course on human sexuality, which filled up quickly each semester. The couple had a more open dialogue about sexuality than many other couples. They often discussed their desires, fantasies, and needs with a frankness that was rare in most relationships. Yet Barbara's question still caught Oliver off guard. She added, "And what if it was with Ben Affleck? After all, we're talking about a celebrity." After 43 years of marriage, Oliver had learned not to be too surprised. He played along, answering, "Well, if it's Ben Affleck, I suppose I wouldn't mind." Barbara clapped her hands gleefully and exclaimed, "Wonderful!" This sudden enthusiasm took Oliver aback. "What?" he asked, now with a more cautious tone. Barbara laughed, reassuring him. "Don't worry, dear. I've never met Ben Affleck and wouldn't even know where to start. But that brings me to my next question." At this point, Oliver began to feel uneasy, sensing that the conversation was heading into tricky territory. Barbara continued, "If I really did have an affair with Ben Affleck, how do you think you would actually feel? Let's be serious. People always joke about the celebrity exception, but I want to know your honest reaction." Relaxing a bit, thinking she was likely gathering material for her human sexuality course, Oliver calmed down. "Honestly, Barbara, I'd need to think about it. I'm not sure how I'd feel." Barbara smiled, clearly willing to give him time. "All right, dear. Take your time. I'll go make some coffee." Oliver realized this was her subtle way of signaling that she expected a thoughtful answer. Despite his internal discomfort, he began to seriously contemplate the question. Of course, if she slept with Ben Affleck, he would be angry and upset. But was a hypothetical fling with a celebrity worth ending their 43-year marriage? Barbara had been an amazing wife, mother, and partner throughout their life together. When Barbara returned, she had that familiar look of a teacher, signaling it was time for an answer. She sat down and looked at him expectantly. "Barbara, honestly, I would feel hurt and betrayed, especially if you kept it a secret. Even if I knew in advance, it would still be painful." Barbara nodded, absorbing his words. "I understand, but would that be enough to destroy our marriage?" she asked more seriously this time. Oliver thought carefully before answering, "No, I don't think it would destroy our marriage, but it would definitely bring a lot of pain." She seemed to take in his words, though her posture indicated that she wanted to ask one more question. "And what if it wasn't Ben Affleck, but Charlie Miller from my department at the college?" Without thinking, Oliver joked, "Well, in that case, I'd shoot both of you and happily spend the rest of my life in prison." Most people might have expected Barbara to feel uncomfortable with such a response, but Oliver knew his wife better. She remained as calm as ever. "I understand, dear, but don't worry. I won't do anything with Charlie that I wouldn't do with Ben. And now you might be thinking, oh no, Oliver is in danger. But trust me, you have nothing to worry about. I've been navigating the ups and downs of marriage for quite some time now, and I'd like to think I've become somewhat of an expert. Honestly, it's not as complicated as many people believe. Sure, there are a few key points, but it boils down to this. With Ben, I could offer you an extraordinary level of intimacy, something most women never experience. Although, if the rumors are true, many have already had the chance to try it." Barbara, always an attentive listener, nodded in agreement, resting her chin on her hand. "But when it comes to Charlie Miller, I've seen how he acts around you at every gathering. Do you remember that conversation we had a while back about him, you, and that mistletoe situation? It's been clear for a long time that he's trying to get you into bed. He just can't keep his eyes off your chest, like a moth drawn to a flame. He's been divorced twice already. Ever wondered why? Now here's what you don't know. My own thoughts about him. Considering you continue to interact with him, I'm starting to wonder if you're trying to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. Barbara tried to interrupt me, but I stopped her with a raised hand, indicating it wasn't time for that yet. Seriously, Barbara, do you honestly believe that scumbag would keep personal matters private? He'd probably spill every detail online for everyone to see. Once I started speaking, I couldn't stop. If you slept with Charlie Miller, it would be the ultimate betrayal. I might not go as far as putting a bullet in your head, but our marriage would definitely be over. I paused for a moment to catch my breath. Thanks for the advice, I added sarcastically. Always so helpful. Barbara stood up, gently patted my arm, and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. I'm going to bed. Are you coming soon? Soon, yes, I replied. I just need to finish this chapter. She gave me a curious look. What's been keeping you so engrossed these past few days? It's this book. The chapter I'm reading explains why some traders preferred mules over oxen for transporting wagons. I couldn't help but show a little excitement. Barbara, less enthused, forced a polite smile. Now I understand why you're so fascinated. Good night, dear. I caught a slight eye roll as she left the room. Not everyone shares a love for the fine art of historical narrative. However, I wasn't particularly bothered. But I mentally chastised myself for getting drawn into a conversation I should have avoided. Still, I knew it wasn't over. I had learned to read Barbara well over the years. It reminded me of the time we went on a short vacation, and I told her to pack just one suitcase. When it was time to leave, Barbara, with our 2 kids in tow, showed up with a massive antique Saratoga trunk, inherited from her grandmother, grinning like the Cheshire Cat as they all tried to fit it into our SUV. I swear the car sagged under its weight. My punishment for not being more specific in my instructions? I spent the whole trip with my legs pressed up against a small travel bag. The next day, we went about our usual business. That night, after I cooked dinner, we returned to our usual routine, sitting side by side in our cozy chairs, absorbed in our books. It might seem dull to some, but for us, it was a special, quiet togetherness. Even when the kids were little, they knew not to disturb us during reading time. And just as I had concluded that mules were probably the better choice, Barbara placed her book on my lap. Dear, I want to revisit our conversation from yesterday, she said. I wasn't surprised. As I mentioned earlier, I knew it wouldn't end just like that. How would you react if I told you I wanted to have an affair with a woman, like, say, Tracy Wilson? I snapped my book shut. Mules and oxen would have to wait. Barbara had my full attention. So you're telling me this directly? No secret affairs behind my back? Exactly, she replied, carefully watching my reaction. You'd know everything in advance. Who knows? Maybe you'd even take part in it. I eagerly awaited the answer, and it was yes. Yes. Looking back, I should have seen the trap I was walking into, but clearly you've never met Tracy. My thoughts drifted into somewhat indecent fantasies, imagining the possibility of a threesome with her and my wife. Wait, don't rush to judge me, I'm just being honest. After all, I'm a man. Okay, I admit it. Realistically, such a situation would probably end with me having a heart attack, but still. Really, Oliver? Something like what happened with Ben and Charlie, right? This time I didn't need as much time to think as I did last night. I wasn't entirely sure how upset I would be, but I felt my emotions would depend on the role I played in this situation. My response was tinged with a hint of pride and a barely noticeable hope. She rolled her eyes even more dramatically than she had the night before. Message received. So your idea of loyalty is more about how threatened you feel by my actions, rather than any real moral compass, right? She shot back. Ouch. That hit hard. I fell silent, deciding it was better not to respond. I had already dug myself a deep enough hole. She sat there, staring at me, tapping her foot against the chair, waiting for me to say something. It was time to face the reality of the situation. Barbara, why are you so insistent on having an affair with that creep Miller? I asked. Look, she began. "Charlie is a snake, sure, but not for the reasons you imagine." It took me a moment to understand what she meant. I know. You probably would have figured it out quicker, but my mind was elsewhere. I sat there, stunned, silent. Eventually, she decided to show a bit of mercy and explain further. "Darling, this won't be some passionate affair. It's part of my research on human sexuality. I think it will give me valuable insights." My mouth went dry and I felt lightheaded. "Come on, dear. We both know your problem isn't morality. It's your fragile male ego," she continued. "And by the way, Charlie is no more a threat to us than Ben or Tracy. This is going to happen, whether you like it or not. Next weekend, I'm going with Charlie, from Friday to Sunday, and I'll be back Sunday evening. No harm done. It won't change anything between us." She spoke to me as if I were some disobedient child. "Thomas, you're not going to leave me over this. It's just one weekend for research, and then everything will go back to normal. I might even treat you to your favorite analogy about mules and oxen when I get back." "Barbara, I don't own you, and I can't stop you. But if you go through with this, it will be a turning point. Whatever happens, it will leave a mark on you, on us." "You're right. I wouldn't point a gun at you both, but our marriage? I'm not so sure about that." I tried to keep my voice calm. "Think about how this will look to your colleagues." I immediately regretted saying that. I realized most of her colleagues had probably already sampled this man. "Barbara," I continued, "remember the story I once told you about the glamorous woman at the fancy party? She was talking to a charming stranger and he asked her, 'Madam, if I offered you $1,000,000, would you sleep with me?' The woman, surprised, thought it over and eventually replied, 'Yes, I think I would.' 'And what if I offered you $10?' he continued. Offended, she replied, 'No way! What do you take me for?' We had already solved the main issue, madam. Now it was just a matter of sorting out the minor details. I walked behind her, shouting, 'Barbara, listen, if you keep this up, sooner or later everyone, literally everyone, is going to find out who you really are.' I paused briefly before adding, 'That's all I'm going to say about it.' 'Do what you think is right,' I added, deciding not to bring up the topic again. From that moment on, I didn't raise the issue with her in conversation. Predictably, the tension at home remained for the rest of the week. Barbara's stubborn nature prevailed, and she clearly wasn't planning on returning to that conversation. "Well, dear, I'm heading over to Charlie's. Don't worry, we'll be fine," she tried to reassure me, though the tension was palpable. "And what will you be up to while I'm gone? Hopefully something enjoyable?" "Maybe you'll head down to the basement and tinker with your model trains," Barbara teased, quickly kissing me on the cheek before heading out the door. As it closed behind her, I called out with a smile, "Don't worry about me. I'll probably be spending time with Madison Garcia." For context, Madison Garcia was the only woman I knew with a bigger chest than Barbara, and she hadn't hesitated to flirt with me a few times, even in Barbara's presence. I buried myself in the newspaper, pretending to be deeply engrossed in reading. Yes, believe it or not, some of us still flip through physical newspapers. I heard the door creak open, and looking up, I saw Barbara standing at the threshold, staring at me as if challenging me. "You wouldn't dare." I smirked slyly, folded the paper, and gave her a knowing look. She didn't say a word. Instead, she slowly took off her sweater, and without stopping, headed toward the bedroom. As she passed me, she paused for a moment and said, "You know, her chest isn't even real." Without waiting for a response, she continued to the bedroom, unpacking her things as if nothing had happened. The whole scene reminded me of an old joke about a farmer who sold a talking mule to a carnival owner. Naturally, the owner asked for proof before buying. The mule did indeed say a few words, and the thrilled showman paid up, thinking he'd struck gold. But a couple of weeks later, the disappointed owner came back demanding his money, claiming the mule had gone silent, and nothing he tried worked. Without a word, the farmer picked up a hefty stick and said, "This would make a good baseball bat." Then he struck the mule square on the head. The mule instantly started talking again. The farmer turned to the owner and said, "Sometimes you've got to get its attention first." With that amusing story in mind, I reopened the newspaper and flipped to the sports section to check the game results. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. When I finally returned home, my pulse had slowed, but the weight of the evening still pressed on me. It had been an exhausting series of events, a night I wouldn't want to relive anytime soon. What I witnessed had shaken me more than I expected, although I knew I wasn't the first person to face something like this. The difference was that, being a police officer, I was better prepared for the unexpected. I grabbed a bottle of beer and sank into my favorite chair, waiting for my wife to come home. She had been out with her friends, and I expected her back soon. Minutes dragged on, 10, 20. I began to wonder if she was running late when I heard the familiar sound of her key turning in the lock. Here it was, the moment of truth. Everything could go in any direction now. By dawn, our relationship could be shattered beyond recognition, but the next few minutes would decide everything. The choice was hers. "Oh, Charlie," Emily said, surprised to see me sitting in the chair when she entered the house. "What are you still doing up?" The question was logical. At 2 in the morning, it wasn't usual for me to be awake. For months now, I'd typically been fast asleep by the time she returned from her weekly outings with her friends. Her question didn't catch me off guard. I studied her carefully, still struck by how beautiful she was. She was almost 53, a few years younger than me, with a slim figure, long legs, and looks that still caught the attention of others. Her face was sweet and radiant, but I couldn't shake the memory of the men at the club who had lined up to dance with her, their hands wandering too boldly. "Did you have a good time tonight?" I asked calmly. "Not bad," she replied casually, kicking off her shoes. "Just fun as usual, nothing special." Was that true? Was what I saw just another ordinary night? If so, did that mean every Wednesday was like this when she went out with her friends? Sarah and Abigail? She hesitated for a moment before taking off her jacket, as if she were weighing her options. Normally I wouldn't have noticed, but tonight I knew why she hesitated. I knew exactly how revealing her blouse had been, and that she'd removed her bra before coming home. I wondered how many times she had returned like this while I slept, completely unaware. "Ready for bed, dear?" she asked with a smile. "At least I won't wake you up tonight." She wasn't wrong. When she came home late, she sometimes woke me, and if I wasn't too tired, we'd continue where we left off. But if I was out cold, there was always the next day. "Wait, Emily," I said, stopping her as she headed for the stairs. "Can we talk about this tomorrow, Charlie?" she asked, a note of desperation in her voice. "I'm so tired, I really need a shower." "No," I said firmly. For the first time that night, she truly looked at me. The smile faded from her lips. "Take off your jacket and sit down," I said. "It's fine," she replied, sitting down but keeping her jacket on. "I'm comfortable like this." "Take off the jacket, Emily," I repeated, more insistent this time. "I'm really okay," she said, but I didn't believe her. "Take off the damn jacket when I tell you to," I snapped. She flinched, scared, and after a pause, slowly removed the jacket. Her arms remained crossed over her chest, trying to hide what I already knew. She wasn't wearing a bra. I could see the faint movement of her chest under the tight dress. She had lost more than just her bra tonight, and I knew exactly where it had gone. Her bra and panties were in my pocket, but I wasn't ready to reveal that. I told her how my partner, Michael, and I had been patrolling when we noticed a car resembling hers parked near the Wild Coyote Club, a well-known place in town, with a bad reputation, right in the heart of our coastal community. I asked her if it was her car, even though I already knew the answer. She had told me she was going to dinner with her friends that evening. How much did she think I knew? I watched as she struggled to find the right words. "The Wild Coyote?" she asked, frowning, as if she couldn't remember the name. "That's right," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Before you answer, think carefully. Our marriage might depend on it." I watched the color drain from her face. Her hand gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself, her chest rising and falling heavily from the strain of keeping control. She had stopped trying to cover her chest, and her dress no longer hid the fact that she wasn't wearing a bra. "That's right, Charlie," Emily whispered, her breath shaky. It's a club, but also a restaurant. We had dinner there. And did you dance? I asked, my voice curious, but with a hint of something more. Dance, Charlie? She repeated, her voice trembling. What's wrong with dancing? I smirked, playing along. I'm just curious, did you dance? Emily's gaze locked onto mine, searching for clues, trying to figure out how much I knew. In our 35 years of marriage, she had never outright lied to me, but this time was different. She knew the ground beneath her was shaky, and I could see the tension in her eyes. Have you been to the club, Charlie? She asked, her voice barely concealing her anxiety. That's for you to find out, isn't it? I replied, maintaining a light but suggestive tone. So, did you dance? She hesitated, her thoughts racing, trying to figure out how much truth I had already uncovered. Yes, we danced, she finally admitted, her voice quiet. The three of us danced a bit. I didn't respond immediately, just kept watching her, the silence growing heavier, making her shift nervously in her chair. All right, she continued, clearly struggling with the truth. We danced a lot, Charlie. Most of the night. Who did you dance with, Emily? I asked calmly, though the question was deliberate. Anyone in particular? She sighed, the tension between us palpable. A few guys here and there. You know how it is. 3 women like us. It's hard not to attract attention. She wasn't lying. I knew how charming Emily and her friends could be, especially in short dresses and high heels, their smiles drawing eyes, their energy captivating. But no one stood out? I pressed. No one you spent more time with? Emily's expression flickered between frustration and guilt. She tried to stand but sat back down, realizing she was caught. Charlie, stop playing games with me, she snapped, her frustration spilling over. How long were you there? What did you see? I wouldn't want to ruin the mystery, I replied, letting her frustration build, then added, Now tell me everything about tonight. Lie, and it's over. Be honest, and maybe I'll find it in me to forgive you. Her silence said a lot. She understood how serious this was. Charlie, please, she whispered, her voice trembling. I love you. You need to know nothing serious happened tonight. We were just fooling around, flirting, that's all. Then tell me everything, I demanded, though inside, I braced for hearing what I already suspected. Emily took a deep breath, her demeanor shifting as if she realized there was no way out. Slowly, she began to recount the night, and I listened, forgetting about sleep or comfort. We arrived at the club, ordered drinks, and soon enough guys started approaching us. They flirted, invited us to dance, and we played along, teasing them a bit. I danced with several of them. One guy danced with me more than the others, but only because he was a really good dancer. I didn't believe her. The way she moved with him wasn't just dancing. From the moment I saw them, it was clear they weren't strangers. Their movements were synchronized, intimate, and his hands never strayed far from her as they danced together. That's it, she finished her story. He left around midnight and we girls stayed much longer. Technically it was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. So you didn't leave with him? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, even though I already knew the answer. Leave with him? She echoed, pretending to be surprised. Why would I leave with him? Her evasiveness was obvious, but despite everything, I still loved her. I decided to give her one last chance to confess. Do you recognize the black BMW parked by the waterfront? I asked, sensing this was her final chance to tell the truth. Emily's face contorted with discomfort, her skin noticeably pale. I heard her quietly mutter, "Oh no," under her breath. The urge to press her was too strong to suppress, and I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction at her embarrassment. "Oh, Charlie," she whispered in despair. I simply shrugged. It's nothing. Honestly, I didn't do anything. Nothing serious happened. Her composure shattered, and she suddenly burst into tears, covering her face with her hands, overwhelmed with guilt. So, how long have you been involved with David Smith? I asked, keeping my tone calm. Her eyes widened in shock. You even know his name? She whispered, lowering her hands in defeat. I'm such a fool, Charlie. I'm so sorry, she admitted, her voice trembling. I nodded silently, though she was too consumed by her grief to notice. With the resources at my disposal, finding out about him had been all too easy. My job allowed me to dig into anyone's life with little effort. If I wanted to, I could have uncovered every intimate detail about him. I let her wallow in her shame a little longer before deciding it was time to press further. Reaching into my jacket, I pulled out her bra and tossed it into her lap. "Missing something?" I asked coldly. She didn't reply, just stared at it. Then I reached into another pocket, pulled out her panties, rolled them up, and threw them her way as well. This she couldn't ignore. Emily let out a quiet groan, shaking her head in disbelief. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but after a few failed attempts, she finally managed to ask through her tears, "How much did you see?" "Everything," I spat. "Every damn detail, from the moment you let him grope you on the dance floor to when he took off your panties." "Charlie," she sobbed. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I wish I'd never met him, but I didn't let him go all the way, I swear." I watched her, remaining stoic as she spiraled further into hysteria, offering empty promises of love and desperate assurances that she didn't let things go too far. "I know, Emily," I said evenly. "I saw everything. If you had gone all the way, we wouldn't be here right now." Those words triggered another round of apologies, pleas for forgiveness, and vows that it would never happen again. Pathetic. Still, I was ready to give her another chance. I knew full well this wasn't the first time she'd allowed herself to be touched like that. There had been other parties where things had gotten too close under the influence of alcohol, for both of us. But I wasn't done testing her. I needed to see how much she valued our marriage and how insignificant David truly was. I reached into my pocket and tossed a small key onto the table between us. Emily stared at the key, her face filled with confusion. "What is that?" she asked, her voice still trembling as she wiped away her tears. "Don't you recognize it?" I asked. She hesitated for a moment, then slowly nodded. "Yes, it's from your handcuffs, right?" "Something like that," I replied. "It's an old model, untraceable, bought them online." She sobbed, still wiping her eyes, trying to comprehend what was happening. "When you left the club with him, he left first, didn't he? And you followed him a little later?" I asked, watching her reaction closely. She nodded again, avoiding my gaze. "I didn't want anyone to see us leave together, or suspect anything." "And when did you come back?" I pressed. "I came back to the club first," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "David returned a few minutes later." "And him? Did he ever come back after that?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Her head shot up, her face a mixture of horror and confusion. She gasped, bringing a trembling hand to her mouth. "No, Charlie, he never came back." We waited for half an hour, but he never came back. In the end, we decided to check his car. It was still there, but he had vanished. I shot her a sharp look, the kind that offers no comfort. I let the tension hang in the air, giving her time to piece together what I was hinting at. Finally it clicked, and she gasped. "Oh God, Charlie, what did you do? What did you do to David?" Panic quivered in her voice. "After you left, Michael and I pulled him out of the car and tied him up. Then we took him to the beach, behind the breakwater, and chained him to a post near the old pier. And we revealed who we really are." Emily's eyes widened with disbelief. "What does Michael have to do with all of this?" "Michael was the one who tipped me off. He found out his wife, Lauren, has been seeing David for the past 6 months. They had an affair while Michael was at work. When Michael started following David, he found out that David was also stalking you. So if I have a reason to hate him, Michael has even more." Emily cursed under her breath. "Lauren was the one who introduced me to him, but I had no idea she was involved with him. What now, Charlie? Are you really going to leave him there all night?" I studied her face, trying to read her reaction. "It's not that simple. We left him in a spot where, when the tide rises, the water will be about 3 feet over his head." Her face turned pale, and she whispered in a barely audible voice, "You can't let him drown, Charlie." I remained calm. "He has one chance, Emily. By now, the water's probably already touching his feet. In 40 minutes, it'll all be over, and it's a 20-minute drive to the beach." She stood still, silent. I had given her a hard choice. If he means something to you, you'd better save him. But if you do, you'll never see me again. Either I disappear or I end up in prison. If you decide to stay, come to bed with me and I'll forgive you. We'll pretend none of this ever happened." Emily sat, trembling, holding the key in her hand. She wasn't going to get away with this easily. "You have 10 minutes left," I reminded her. I was about to find out just how much she truly cared about me. If the situation hadn't been so grim, it might have almost been funny, watching her sit there, her eyes dry but her body shaking with fear. She was too wrapped up in guilt to even question whether I was telling the truth. The truth was that after Michael and I pulled David out of the car, we gave him a stern warning. If he ever saw one of our wives near his club again, he'd know to send them away. Though it's unlikely he'll be dealing with club business anytime soon, because we gave him a decent beating. We hung him upside down by the breakwater, just as the tide was starting to rise. Not the best place for a man. 5 minutes left, I said to her, but she still didn't move. Then, as if resigned to her fate, Emily looked at me and quietly said, "Let's go to bed, Charlie." That's when it hit me. It was my moment of decision. Had she suffered enough? I wasn't entirely sure, but then I made up my mind. "Emily, your lover is safe. It was a test. But don't think this is over. Tomorrow, I'm starting the divorce process." This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.